Now, and let's go play the intro.
You're listening to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge.
Hello and welcome to eLearnChat, our new podcast featuring prominent leaders, shakers and movers in the e-learning and training industry.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and you're watching eLearnChat, episode number 43. Next to me, over here, you'll see her, is Jean Franzblau. Hi, Jean. How are you today?
Hi. Fantastic. Good morning.
Well, here we are. This is what, your third or fourth episode already?
I think third. And I'm still trying to figure out how to square myself on the screen.
Well, part of the problem is just the screen. Here we go. Let me get you out here. There you go. Now you get full screen.
Thanks. Cool.
Anyway, well, Jean, we have a very special guest today. Would you like to introduce him?
I would. Ray Jiminez is the Chief Learning Architect and founder of Vignettes Learning and Vignettes for Training Incorporated. He is the founder and architect of TrainngMagNetwork.com, which is affiliated with Training Magazine with 35,000 members. It's a social learning community. Ray is also the architect and founder of Minute Games, the author of 3-Minute eLearning, the author of Do-It-Yourself eLearning, which for me is like a Bible in eLearning, scenario-based eLearning, and then he also has an upcoming book called Story Impact. He's a busy guy in our eLearning community, and with pleasure, I want to introduce everybody to Ray Jiminez.
You didn't know we had a live audience, did you, Ray?
Oh my God. Oh my God. I hope you're not giving them margarita. It's only 8 o'clock in the morning.
Well, this is California, but...
Yeah.
Ray, you're in Northern California, right?
Right now I'm in Northern California. I drove last night from Los Angeles to Fresno. We're going to enjoy all the cows.
Do you live in Fresno?
No, I live in Pasadena, but I...
Oh, you live real close to us.
Oh, really? So where are you?
I'm in Camarillo.
Oh my God, you're very close.
And I'm in Santa Monica, and you, sir, you're in a hotel room. Is that right? Are we doing
I am in a hotel room.
Fantastic.
The great Fairfield Inn.
Yep. Well, you're very close. One of these days we need to get together.
We do. We need to.
Yeah. Though I have a funny suspicion we met years ago. I was mentioning that to Jean last night, that we may have met.
I'm sure.
Maybe 13, 14 years ago. I vaguely remember.
I was about 5 years old then.
I was 3, so I know how that feels. Actually, I'm probably older than you are, so.
Ray, I have a question to kickstart us.
Sure.
Just to give people a sense of what you do, tell us about your business and what you do for your clients.
Well, I've been very fortunate, and thanks to a lot of friends and clients, to have focused my interests in the area of e-learning, social learning, and particularly in the area of spending time in developing software that would help key of my clients accomplish what they think is unique to them. So I'm not a mass production software developer that I aim for millions of users. I'm more of a back-end, in-depth, deep back-end provider for my clients. So essentially, very quickly, I do a lot of workshops and consulting on e-learning, technology-assisted systems. And then we also do a lot of software in learning platforms, social media, games. And then, of course, my other love is I spend a lot of my time helping companies trying to organize their content so they can use stories and experience-based learning. And that's really what I have discovered to be where I focus a lot of my energies.
And you know, it's interesting, Ray, because there's so little effort paid to stories in learning, which is probably one of the most classical ways people learn. We learn stories from our parents, our grandparents, everyone around us, and those stories carry weight and they're relevant. And I'm always amazed at how little people focus on that, and you seem to have done a whole career on it, which is great. It just makes a lot of sense.
Right. Well, if I may, we all are trained trainers, instructional designers, so we've been trained to the classical learning system by teaching and transferring knowledge. But sometimes, more often, we forget that there is another way of doing learning, which is learning by actually making a failure or learning from failure. And what I've realized that in the classroom, we tend to do a lot of stories. The really good trainers tell stories, but online, we have completely forgotten that part.
It's really true. We've done a lot of e-learning, and we keep wanting to put more into it. Of course, customers just say we just want a quick, dirty, cheap. We don't want to do much, but they miss. I think they miss a lot of the value of e-learning and of storytelling and vignettes. I know we've tried a lot to do little stories, little videos wherever we can in the training. Not everybody wants it, but they're very effective. And and I love the name of your company, Vignettes, because it's all about vignettes.
Yes, indeed. And
we were thinking we might demo a vignette, and rather than that, we have some links in the chat area where folks can look at a vignette themselves. I was thinking of one, Ray. Do you mind if I talk about one that really sticks in my mind? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. There was a vignette where a client talks to a salesperson. They're seeing each other after, let's say, a few months of not having a conversation. And the client says, I just found out from another prospective client of yours that you offered this prospective client a real deal. A deal that they're paying significantly less than we are for the same product. And then the way the vignette ends, it says, how would you handle this? And then many of your subscribers have really incredible good answers and solid answers that they've typed in and sharing their ideas about how they would handle this embarrassing moment for the salesperson. And what I find is that you're not prescribing an answer, unless there's something I'm missing, that for a client, then you would have an articulate answer and they would be going through a whole program to come up with what the company says this is what you should do in that situation. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's kind of in a classical way, it's perplexing. It is seemed to be simple, but many trainers or those involved in helping others learn are pretty much preoccupied with teaching something. We seem to undermine or underscore or not realize that the learner has tremendous amount of experience, even from a little child or even to an adult. So one of the best ways to help them learn is to connect, number one, to connect their real life situation, because it is only by real life situations that people find meaning in content. In that case you mentioned, Gene, for example, we lecture somebody and say, by the way, you need to handle the client by doing step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nobody cares about those steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you bring them into a real life event, quickly they will connect their meaning to that. The second component is this. I discovered that if you bring in the right kind of story that brings in the learner, you actually help the learner to connect the content that do exist in their own mind and their own situation. So that's where I've discovered and using story in learning processes, Gene.
Fantastic. Here's a question I have. If a client, is using that particular vignette, and an employee puts a comment there that really feels like it would be off base, that it would be out of policy for the client, how do you recommend that these chat areas be monitored and be facilitated and steered into, let's say, the right direction? I'm trying to think with the mindset. I'm putting on the hat of the client.
Right. Now, the major thing we discovered in social media has been that more and more we need to have a curated interaction. Now, maybe out of 10 interactions in a conversation after a vignette, maybe 8 will be valuable in adding and sharing their own experiences and their content to help the learners think deeper. There will be 1 or 2% or even more or less that a mentor, a coach will come in and ask reflective question to that particular person, or send another question so that the learner would be able to reflect further. Sometimes, even if you give them a steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Jean, people don't pay attention to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can only really do so much to the learner. But the best way to do it is to curate it, to manage it, to monitor it, and ask further reflective questions of the learner.
Well, what I appreciate is your deep respect for the knowledge of the learner. They're not children to you, they're adults with life experience, and there's so much to that. I bet yeah. And about having it curated, is that a service that you provide ongoing, or do you train an in-house employee curator to ask the kind of reflective questions, which asking good questions is an art form?
Yeah, in fact, I've been trying to figure out that solution, and what we've been doing for some of our clients is to sort of walk them through and guide that the crux of this is, instead of assuming that you need to teach, you need to help, and helping it by asking questions. And number one, it really starts with just the sincere desire, the sincere respect. The learner knows something, and you have to help him or her connect to their own real life situation. So we help clients do that. In fact, we have major capabilities in helping trainers, online mentors shift from the traditional telling mode to the mode where they are more reflective. But there's really nothing peculiarly difficult about this, Gene. For those of us who are good in facilitator in the classroom, we understand that unless we ask reflective questions, we're grabbing away from the learner the opportunity to think for themselves. So Roger Schank, I'm reading his book right now on teaching minds. The bottom line, he says, is that let's not grab the opportunity for the learners to think. And a good trainer's job is to really help the learners think, because they can figure it out.
I love it. Now, as in my own company, when I roll out a video, and by the way, I'm doing it in Vignette, inspired by your do-it-yourself e-learning. I keep it short. I keep it story-based. I'm curious how you recommend to your clients to encourage participation. I know for myself, when it comes to social media, I tend to lurk. That phrase that means that I look, and I might not put my comment in. How do you assure that people are participating when you can't see them, smell them, touch them, reach to them?
And by the way, Gene, people do see you.
What?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. And the open-ended social learning environment should not be confused with the structured social learning or learning online. There's got to be an agreement with the learner that one of the best ways to learn is to be active. Because if you're going to have a discussion room without any social contract with the learner that they must be involved, then we are really not managing the learning event. So what I would recommend you do is to have a contract with your learner. I don't mean it in a legalistic way, but in a more emotional understanding that you help each other from learning with each other. That's number one. The second thing is to really understand that if you're asking them a question, we need to shut up. Ask them a question and don't do anything until they answer it. But thirdly, most of our programs are structured with, okay, here are the learning objectives, 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you think? It doesn't work that way, because if you start with a structured objective, a structured agenda and structured readings, learners begin to go back to the old way of doing things. So what I do usually is to tell my learners online or semi-online or classroom or self-driven learner, to tell them that they need to learn by being very active. Now, one of our biggest challenges right now, Jean and Rick, is that the online tools are so disjointed. You go to one room, you have wiki, you go to another room, you have video. We need to really integrate these tools into one place so we can allow the learners to discover what they need to do. Finally, I think that when you structure an exercise or an activity, instead of telling them, number one, these are the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now have an exercise. That's still the classical old way of, I show you and you do it. It should be the way they are around. You should simply say, by the way, I have this situation. How do you figure it out? And allow them to discover for themselves. So in a nutshell, it is so different from the social learning, which people misunderstand, and use that into a more moderated group. So that is very essential to establish from the very start.
Now, Ray, it's interesting because one of the things that I like to do is put pressure on someone. Without any pressure, a little bit of pressure, not to beat them up, but put a little bit of pressure to make them come up with solutions, make them come up with ideas, make them a little bit uncomfortable.
Sure.
Because otherwise they're just going to, in fact, when you're dealing with, let's say, millennials, they like to be spoon-fed. And that doesn't always work in life. Eventually, mom and dad and whoever aren't going to feed you anymore. And so a little bit of pressure is good. Get them out of their comfort zone a bit and make them think. Make them try to figure out solutions to the situation at hand or the problem we're trying to solve. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's good. I'll share my screen in a short while. I'll show to you that if you want them to be active, one of the better ways is to ask to track and help them get a feedback. Now, I know the concept of gamification is somehow been abused, but the whole idea is that if you want learners to get involved, you also need to give them the opportunity to track their involvement. For example, the traditional way of doing learning is we track by asking them a test of how much they memorize. Well, sometimes it works, and many people still believe in that. I don't believe in it. What I believe in is that if people are involved in an activity, they're submitting projects, they're doing posting, they're making a comment, they're making a mapping, they do all of these things. We need to be able to track so that they can get this back to themselves and say, oh, these are the milestones I need to achieve, and I haven't done that. And it's very transparent that everybody in the group would see that. So for me, that's a kind of a self-preservation, like, a combination of a stick and a carrot kind of thing. But the pressure, really, it is difficult challenge to help the learners. But I agree, we need to be more creative to find ways and means to put them on the spot. And that's why I love scenarios and stories, because you can pressure the learner without them learning or knowing that they're being pressured. And I think that's the biggest thing to do. Let them be pressured, but not really in a coercive or manipulative way.
Right. And one of the things that I remember years ago, this is probably 12, 13 years ago, we went to visit kind of a co-company. We were working with them in Long Beach, and they were playing a video, and if I could remember the name of the HR company, something with a Z, Zelig maybe. They make some really good training videos. This is back then. They were all VHSs and DVDs. And they had one on how to interview people. And to this day, I remember it. It was so impactful because it started out with, there was an Asian guy in the middle of a room, and the guy behind the desk was this big guy, and he says, so, what did you do in your previous job? But somehow, the way the guy was asking questions, the guy in the middle felt like he was under the lights, and the scene all of a sudden changes. We're no longer in an office. Now we're in a prisoner of war camp. And the lights are on him. He's sweating. The guy's in his face screaming at him. And the scene comes back, and the guy goes, Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee, are you okay? Yeah. It was so effective. And it was all about how not to badger somebody when you're interviewing, how to make them feel comfortable, how to relax them so that they can actually express themselves. And it was funny how that little 15-minute video to this day just stuck in my mind. And I think that was, to me, excellent training. If it can stay that long, that's pretty excellent.
In our chat room, we've been discussing the idea of making mistakes and how useful it can be. And some of our folks are saying that it's good that they don't feel like they're going to make a fool of themselves, or that they won't be made a fool of. And also to encourage them, if they made a mistake and worked their way through it to a solution, to give them positive reinforcement for making the error and continuing to plug along until they found their way.
Right.
Yeah, too many people are afraid to make a mistake. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
What you said about the 15-minute training, what were you going to say, Ray? Sorry.
Yeah, one thing I realized is that there's a fallacy that if a trainer reflects on it honestly, we think we are in control of the learner. We are never in control of the learning. So when I run a workshop in a classroom, I'm always having a joke and tell them that I am so lucky I have you 5% of the time in the workshop. We're never in control. So let go the concept of control, because we're never in control. So the learner are always learning their way in their mind. And the more we understand that, the more likely we get to organize our programs to maximize that way of learning, because you said they have to discover it for themselves.
Ray, it seems to me that you've been thinking these thoughts and putting them into practice for years. And yet, to me, I see you as a visionary and a revolutionary and a rebel. In the e-learning community, do people want to arm wrestle with you about these concepts and keep things traditional and the way we're comfortable? What are you noticing out there?
Well, there's I have to be very candid. Sometimes I feel that I'm so isolated from the rest of the e-learning world. And when I reflect on this, sometimes I feel guilty. But candidly, what I discovered was that we have a major momentum going on in our e-learning world. And in learning in whole, that is so enamored with the old way of doing things. So when I look at and talk to a lot of people, I'm not being an elitist or I'm not being an isolationist. I hear the same regurgitation of the same thing. For example, we have software that replicates what we do linear learning. We have LMSs that is still linear learning. So when I look at that, I'm always looking for what are the great ways of looking at this that will fundamentally make a difference. By the way, Jean, I am just a humble person trying my own little thing in my own room, figuring out ways and means. The biggest opportunity I have is that when I go to a client, I invite them, I challenge their minds to make prototypes, to make some example, to make some testing that will uniquely work for them. Because I could not port in a solution to a client. So in my own way, I will probably never answer all the questions I have with learning. I'm just a small little soldier trying to make a living, at the same time trying to articulate in myself foremost how these things matter, and then find an opportunity to practice them. I am nowhere close to a lot of people who are out there in the leading edge of e-learning. I'm in my own small little tiny corner, just trying to get some excitement for myself and make some money at the same time.
But it's a big corner.
I hope so.
It brings us to the issue about clients. I work for an organization that I think is very forward-thinking. They're huge on videos. They want to try lots of things. And yet when push comes to shove, I'm having meetings with leadership to find out what exactly do you want our learners to learn. And I am being asked to prescribe, this is how you do it, exactly. So I feel feelings about that because I so respect your model and I want so much to follow in your footsteps. Are you able to find clients who are forward-thinking enough to embrace what you're doing and make yourself a good living? I have to ask.
Well, what I discovered is very interesting, Jean. I'm in Fresno today because, and I've been driving here for the past 8 weeks, several times of driving from LA. I've become master of the driver for this location, but this is a huge company, and over the years, they have so technical information. You're talking about very detailed technical information about agriculture. So they're hitting the wall because people are complaining about not the quality of training, but really that the training and the learning and the knowledge is so inaccessible. So what I usually do is I work with a client who are line-oriented people, because the line-oriented people are really concerned in helping their customers, helping their staff to cut on cost and to make money. With that concept, therefore, I'm able to go in and tell them, look, if you want to help people to have accessible learning on the job that they can learn at the point of need, you need to rethink the way you learn. You cannot organize content like it is a big, enamored, bundled content because nobody reads them. So once they understand that no longer can anyone be pushed to learn, especially with today's very disjointed, very competitive, and the world that there's no one has a time to literally go study. What they want is to do troubleshooting. So this company I'm working with right now, we're doing not e-learning. We're not doing training. We're doing troubleshooting snippets, 1 or 2 minutes each, which is the same as learning or training,
Right.
but never accepted by instructional designers to be learning.
You know, that's
Did you
interesting.
have something?
Go
you were
ahead,
going to
Jean.
say, sorry, Rick.
No, go ahead, Jean.
I was going to say, Rick, Ray, did you have something that you were able to show us in a screen share?
Yeah, I can show you a little bit of stuff. Yeah, if you want me to do that, go ahead. And should I go now? I can do
That's
that.
probably a good time.
Okay, good, very good. So let me go to my screen a little bit here, and I think I can find this. Share my screen. So since you brought up that conversation, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back in here to a couple of examples. For example, let me see if you can see this. I'm going to increase my screen a little bit here. This is an
Looks
interesting concept. Can you see this left-hand side here?
Yes.
A star, my star. And then you have project 0, 10, 1, 2, 0, comments, etc. And like this is what I call helping the learners to track what they do online. So instead of giving them a test, we track them basically what they do. So what that is there's a mechanism in the software that will tell the learner, which is set up with the trainer or the facilitator, that these are your objectives of your contributions in the learning process. So your projects, 10%, you allocate value to it. That way the learners are getting their own feedback and collectively see what happens to group participation by getting this information in the process. So that's just an example of moving away from testing, but moving into a process-based learning where people can learn as they move forward. So any thoughts on this, Jin and Rick?
Yeah, I do. I just know that, the employees where I am working really want to score high. They enjoy that, and they're highly motivated by seeing these numbers and percentages. So I like this a lot.
So this is another way of creating it. So in any case, I just wanted to show to you a vignette, which I think I will not play anymore, Gene, because the screen is quite small, right? But you gave everybody a link to this one. One of the most interesting thing that I have done here is to put a person on the spot. And these vignettes, by the way, the shorter they are, the better. And there are many, many ways to write this story. And this kind I call the jolt, meaning to say, if you want people to pay attention to what your stories are or to your scenarios, you have to really exaggerate, because nobody wants to go to a boring story, right? Everybody wants to go to like exaggerated. For example, yeah, go ahead, Jin.
I was going to say, yes, you always bring things to a head. They're very well thought out scenarios that are super awkward.
Right, super awkward, and because we pay attention to them. In fact, we don't learn the easy way. We learn the hard way, and the only way we learn is when we break our heads into the wall, right?
Yep.
And that's why we want the learners to come in. And they're like 1 or 2 minutes, and they're really simple. You can do this without even an audio. You can do this just by graphics or by image. In fact, with a good writer, you can just even do this with a text. The idea is that it has, you don't have to have a lot of multimedia, just a powerful scenario, right? Yeah, and another thing I'd like to just share with you quickly is this, can you see this all?
Yes.
Story sharing and experience. I sort of prepared this to just share with the group quickly. All around here is that every learner, as long as they contribute and reflect and do something, they are contributing content to the learning process. And this is where the learning is happening. And by the way, there's nothing new to this. We know this and we've observed this. When you go into a workshop in a classroom, people would learn, I learned from this guy, I learned from that guy, I'm sure he learned from me, I learned from the teacher too. But most of the time, we know that people learn by listening to other people's experiences. So we begin by optimizing that as a model. So this is what I follow as I process. People learn in different ways, so you allow them to contribute in different fashion and in different ways. Other things I'd like to share with you quickly is just an example. For example, here, let me just go reduce this one a little bit. So if you have a project, what you do is you ask the person to, for example, can you reflect on this project? And what you do is you ask them to, for example, to say, okay, can you map out the information? Now you're going to give them a mapping tool. Now, there's nothing new with this, right? People can create a mapping tool, and so they can map ideas and they can be together. You can create newer ideas there if you like. As a process, you can put it up and map the information. But the more people actively think through, the purpose of the tools is to help people think through. And that's the key to think through. For example, you can give them some drawing tools so that they can think through the object and reflect and represent in their minds. So this is what I've been busy about, figuring out ways and means to help the learners reflect and think through, because that's, for me, at least from my experience, one of the better ways to have long-lasting, more valuable, and more meaningful experiences as a learner.
Now, Ray, also the software you're showing right now, is this software that you're using, selling, or?
Yeah, this software is uniquely to some of our clients,
okay.
and we don't sell it in the public itself, but we have, if some of you wants to have access to the software and example, if I may, you can just email me, and I think Rick and Jill has given you my email. I'd be happy to share any one of this information. I'd love to share. In fact, my middle name is Free, Ray for Free Jiminez.
You know, he's not kidding. Ray, you give so much. The first time where we met through ASTD, you gave me some links, and within moments I had this beautiful ebook that I've learned so much from, completely free from you. A perfect example, and every week when you're sending a vignette, aren't you offering the people who receive those emails to use them themselves?
Yes, in fact, they are for free. There's about 55 of these vignettes now. And we're giving out because one of my real dreams is that as long as I live, I think I have maybe another 10 years of productive life until my wife insists that I don't work. But but I'd like to do as many of this, and I'd like to be able to send it out to the world. And I get a lot of gratification that people are actually saying that they're using it in different forms. So if you go to my website and look for the story impacts, you'll be able to see some of these vignettes that you can copy the link and provide access. And by the way, these are all developed by the software called Storyline by Articulate.
Okay.
When you buy later on Articulate, I will be happy to give you the source code for this when you become a member of the Articulate community. I'm not a salesman of Articulate. I want to make sure that you hear that. But I love to work with the guys, and whatever I have in the source code here, I'll be very able to provide to you and to Articulate members.
Well, it's funny. We're trying to get Articulate on the show. I'm friends with a lot of them over there, but we're trying to get them on and talk about their community. They're one of the few companies that have really created a strong community with good support and just a lot of resources there. I think they're a great example of how to create a great community.
Yeah, it's Tom. The loyalty of Tom Coleman in his audience is incredible. Another site that the audience or the group here might want to go is to a game reusable game engine site, which I developed an architect. They can go to my3mg.com. And I've developed this because many trainers I have seen have found it difficult to keep on producing content and games.
And those are 3-minute games. It's 3MG is 3-minute games, correct?
Yeah, 3-minute games. And
I'm giving a link to it right now.
Yeah, they're all easily structured. You just have to put the content. The games are there. And it's worthwhile just testing. That way you don't have to worry about the aesthetics, the color, interaction.
Nice.
You worry about the content, right?
Yep.
So there are many of these examples. So take a look at that, and it's for free again. So you'll have fun doing this. Okay, that's it that I can show you right now.
Okay, so we'll get you back on the screen then.
Sure, good.
Well, this is really good. There's some good ideas and just a lot of good energy in what you're doing.
I still have to find ways to make money though, Gene. So I just keep on giving out stuff, right? But in many, many ways, they come back to me, and I get a lot of gratification by just seeing the glow in people's mind, that there are other ways to look at things. So I'd like to keep on throwing to the pot of knowledge and information.
Ray, I think we need to have your video turned on.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Good.
It's not on?
No.
Okay. There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Hey, Ray,
So,
as we're beginning to wrap up our conversation, there was something really interesting that you sent out this week that I think is controversial, which I'm realizing is quite typical. And it's a vignette about trainers. Are trainers necessary anymore? I don't know if that's the right language you use, but certainly the philosophy behind the question is that something is going away and something else is being reborn, and we need to move along with it. Can you talk a little bit about what you were going for and what the responses have been to that vignette?
Right. It's very interesting because there are, this born out from my experience. There was a large retail online company that hired me, and the trainers were doing orientation programs every day. They hire about 200 people per week, I think per week. And so what the trainer would do is to have a session, and then after a while, somebody would come up and say, Mr. Trainer, what you just said is no longer valuable. And the guy says, no, I just checked it last week. And then the student said, I just checked it this morning in my iPad, in my smartphone, and that's now inaccurate. So I think what we're saying is that trainers have a good place in what we do. We really have a profession. But dramatically, we need to rethink this. And this is what happens. I call this dynamic needs analysis system. We can no longer understand the needs of the learner by asking a survey. We have to be dynamically real-time learning what they need. So therefore, we have to throw away the concept of statically converting a needs analysis, because by the time you finish the needs analysis, the needs in the business have changed.
So true.
So it's got to develop a faster mechanism of doing it. So in that vignette, I said our trainers needed. I showed that example that the trainer is completely out of whack and doesn't want to admit it because he's still thinking that he is the center of the world in terms of knowledge, but no longer happens. So I just want to show that to the world and say, maybe it's about time to reflect a little bit about our job as training, learning professionals, and really be more attuned to not to our old way of doing things, and many of them still work, but many of them needs to be updated, upgraded, and redefining them. And the main invitation I throw back to everyone else is this. There's just so many things going on, very exciting stuff going on, but you need to go back to the core of helping learners. If you want to help learners learn by discovering their need, forget about the survey. There must be other ways. And for me, the best way is to say, what do you need today? And if he says, I have a problem with a troubleshooting issue, great, let me come back tomorrow with a snippet, a 1-minute solution, so you can go back tomorrow. That's dynamic enough that you're doing it so quickly in attune to the need of the business, rather than converting a 3-hour, a 10-hour e-learning program that I will see you 8 months from now, and by the time that 8 months from now, you're completely obsolete. And that's the whole context of the vignette, G.
Yep. And it all comes down to just leveraging information, leveraging knowledge and experience.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Which companies don't usually realize they have experience until they lose it.
Yes, and more and more companies. I have this client in the East Coast that 5 years ago, for every 5 employees, they have 1 new employee and 4 old employees. Today it's the other way around. Right. They have 1 old employee and 4 new employees.
Interesting.
The question is, how do you get this information shared by people? Training will not do the job because training is too structured, it's too slow, it takes too long. Right. It's got to be other things that can take place. So we have a good job in training and learning. Really big opportunities right now for our own profession. We just need to pull back a little bit and rethink how fundamentally we're going to change the way we do things.
Yep. Well, Ray, this has been a great show. And any final comments from the chat room? We've got to wrap it up. We've been going on about 45 minutes now.
What folks have been doing is testing out the links, which I think they're very appreciative of, and just chatting about concepts of being called weird in the workplace when we're approaching learning in a different way than maybe our bosses or senior leaders see how learning needs to be more linear. So this is a real opportunity for not only for us to transform, Ray, but it seems like it's kind of a call to action that we also need to communicate this change to our organizations and our clients so that everybody is getting the best out of learning.
Oh, that's great. Well, Ray, I will see you. I know I'll see you next week at TechKnowledge. Ray will be at TechKnowledge. I believe you're also at Learning Solutions.
Learning Solutions. I'm also at a training 2012 in Atlanta.
Great.
And if you bump off with me, Rick, if you're there, let me know. And for those of you in the audience, please just say hi and send me an email, and look forward to exchange notes with you. Thank you for having me here today, Rick and Jen.
Our pleasure. Thank you. And Gene, next week we're not on, but we will be on the following week.
Terrific. And in the chat room, Jeff from Australia will say hello to everyone at Learning Solutions.
And just for next week, just so next week we're off. We're going to be dark because of ASTD TechKnowledge. The week after, we've got RJ Haquez. He's was an Adobe evangelist. He's now on his own, and he's got all sorts of good information. So again, thanks, Ray, and we will see you all next week. Thanks everybody for being there and subscribing. Bye. We'll see you then. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.